And as promised, I will now address water rates. Council members, I appreciate you very much and thank you for the chance to show you a compromise proposal and some reasons for it. Your passion for Provo and our infrastructure is to be celebrated. Thank you for your work on this. I want to mention a couple of things at the outset. Traditionally, this budget presentation is simply that, a presentation. We are now going to lay out our water rate proposal for you just in really high, broad terms. We have written materials about the proposal that will be provided to you and the residents. You will certainly be able to review it all at your leisure. But you'll notice that our consultant is not here tonight. He let us know over a week ago that he had another commitment. If you would like an opportunity to dive into any technical details or ask questions of our team and consultant, we can absolutely schedule that for another meeting. As you know, our city government is set up so that you as a council will get to determine our water rates. I would now like to review some basics for all our benefit, including the residents. Our residents have been asking a lot of questions, and I thought it would be good to start by us answering some of those. I've shared these questions in advance with our Public Works Director, Gordon Haight, and this content is based on discussions with our consultant. So I'm going to ask Gordon to join me up here, and he'll answer the questions. I picked the questions that have been asked the most to me. So the first one is, we keep hearing about a study having to do with our water infrastructure. So what exactly is the study? And can you tell us what it is and what it says? And if you need a reference, I got it right here.
Okay, thanks. Yes, Mayor. So the study that, you're with us. Okay. I got scared. Somebody came up with behind me. Okay. No, so the study we're talking about is the Water Master Plan. The city has hired Bowen Collins, which is one of the premier water resource engineer firms regionally here in Utah and around the region. And Keith Larson is the project manager that did this project. This master plan looks at all aspects of our water system, including the sources, the storage, the distribution, and how we run it. And as a result of that, the plan comes out and makes recommendations for the next 10 years that the city should look at and attempt to accomplish as it moves forward. So I wanted to just kind of address three items that talk about the funding aspects of the Water Master Plan. The first is the Water Master Plan indicates that the city has done a really good job. The Water Department has been very effective in the past in taking care of our water system. Number two, it indicates that the city is spending about $6 million a year in capital projects to improve the system. The third item is it recommends an increase to the water funds for more capital projects. And what I wanted to do was actually read the comment out of the master plan so we understand why this request was in there. So this is on page 14.3. This large increase is recommended funding is a function of the massive amount of construction inflation observed over the last few years. Because much of the city's infrastructure is still in relatively good condition, it may be acceptable to transition rehabilitation and replacement funding to these higher levels over a period of time. So the reason for this increase isn't because there's been mistakes or there's been a problem with the system. We've had excellent staff that has done a great job, but the inflation is a worry for the consultant, and that's why there was a request or a recommendation to look at additional funding.
Thanks, Gordon. The second most asked question to me was, you said this study covers a 10-year period, but it also talks about an 80-year period. So what's that all about?
So the master plan, we anticipate that this master plan will stay in force and we'll be looking at it till the year 2033. And that gives us 10 years to implement these things that are being recommended. However, the master plan also looks out at an 80-year horizon and beyond to make sure that we're heading down a correct path. But there's so many opportunities for changes and different things that the recommendations are left for the 10-year period. So for that 80-year period, what the master plan does is it looks at all of our infrastructure and determines the life of that and how that would be and how much we can expect the infrastructure to last. It also goes through and looks at the cost of the entire system, how much it would cost if we had to go in there and replace every aspect of it during that 80 years. However, the master plan does not say that you want to replace every aspect of every element of your system in that 80-year period. For example, we have portions of our system that are fairly old that are running extremely well. Recently, we had to expose the most important pipe in the city. This pipe is also one of the oldest. It's over 100 years old, and it transports water year-round, more water than any other system to our residents. This pipe is in relatively good condition. As we inspected it, it has many more years of useful life. So it's important to note that when we look at systems, we got to not only is age considered, but to see how it's fatigue, if it's wearing, if it needs to be replaced, and what the useful life will be. So those are some of the key elements. And the last thing I wanted to bring up about this is that Provo has been recognized as having the third purest water in the United States. That means the least contaminants. And that is a direct reflection on our infrastructure. So our infrastructure is experiencing very little contamination and is very good for our residents. Mayor, I don't know if
So
that answers.
no, that was perfect. And so this is kind of a fun little personal experience I got to have since we've been focused on infrastructure. It was last week, we had drained the water tank that is, let's see, it's west of the Provo Rock Canyon Temple. It's the one with the sand volleyball pit on top of it. And so its turn to be drained and inspected and cleaned and sterilized. So they allowed me to go down in it. And this is like the top 5 things I've ever done in my life. It was so beautiful and so amazing and so pristine. But let me tell you the history on that water tank. It is 95 years old. It was built in 1930. And when it was built, it was the only one of its kind that was in the ground and as big as it was west of the Mississippi back in 1930. The projection there was that it would last 75 years. It is 95 years old. And with the inspectors, we walked around, we talked, and it is in excellent condition and is such a component in our infrastructure. And just, I'm telling you, it is beautiful. That's weird to say because you probably think when you get in a water tank, it's just rusty and gross. This one in 1930 with the cement columns, it is a beautiful sight to see. And they said it is still in excellent shape. So that was kind of a fun little deep dive I got to do on one piece of our infrastructure in the city this past week. Okay, so the next most asked question that the residents have talked to me about is, what about the thoughts that it's cheaper to replace things now than later?
So some of the questions are, for example, is it cheaper to do a planned replacement versus an emergency replacement? And it's always cheaper to do a planned replacement. So one of the things the city does is we evaluate our system very carefully. And like I said, when we look at it, we're looking at the maintenance history, how many leaks it's had, the age, the condition, and a number of aspects associated with each pipe. So we don't just replace a pipe until we know those conditions have been met. And one of the things that this has allowed us to do is we have not had to do emergency pipe replacement. We've had to do emergency pipe repairs. In an average year, we'll do about 33 leaks that we have to repair at about $15,000 a leak. And that happens in every system. The fewer is absolutely better, but that's something that we watch and monitor very closely. And that comes out of our operation budget as we go forward. So the consultant in talking to them is not recommending to replace everything carte blanche, but to look at these things and to look at this criteria, and that this process that we've been using in the past is the one that we need to go forward with in the future. It's kind of a best practice as it allows us to use our money most effectively as we go forward in the future.
You actually answered the last most asked question I got in the top 10 is if our consultant isn't asking us to replace everything within 80 years, why is he asking us to save up enough money to do that?
So part of the consultant's recommendation is a best practices to make sure you have this money on hand because of the inflation and other unexpected things that could be taking place. So as we look at pipes, some of the pipes may not make it 80 years because of corrosive soils or earth moving. And so having these things to funding to replace these pipes is very valuable. And so that's the position he has taken, is to over the next 8 years is to have that money so that we're available for those events that do take place, and we're able to do prepared replacements of our pipes, planned replacements as opposed to emergency. So kind of just to recap, our water department is doing a great job in maintaining their system. They have been effective for decades, and that is going to continue their process and what they've done. There is the request for the increase was based mainly on inflation. That was the biggest cause stated in the study of why we needed to increase revenue. And it also recommends that we continue our existing approach for the replacement of pipes.
That was awesome. Thanks, Gordon.
Okay.
Thanks, John. I'm going to just explain a little more. I've just got a couple charts I want to share. So, okay, council members and residents, I now want to walk you through a few things using a chart. So this is looking at the 10-year period covered by the plan. On the left, we'll look at the funding recommended by the study, and on the right, we're going to look at our funding reality today. You can see that on both, we start with some baseline funding. Provo has been spending $6 million a year on water infrastructure. So over 10 years, that will be $60 million of baseline money. By the way, some have been saying Provo has not been saving for water infrastructure, and that's just not true. We have consistently put away significant reserves for big projects so that when the time is right to make a big expenditure, we can do so out of those reserves. I'm talking about reserves specifically for water infrastructure. And then separate from that, we have our rainy day fund, which has been at historically high levels over the past several years. So the narratives that we have not been taking care of our water infrastructure or that we have not been setting aside revenues are incorrect. The study recommends we do rate increases every year for a total of $65 million in new revenue through the rate increases over 10 years. This is on page 15-5 of the study. So if we follow the study to a T, we would have $125 million to spend on water infrastructure in this 10-year period. So now let's look at our reality. As part of our due diligence before supporting any rate increase, my team, led by our CAO, Scott Henderson, and Department Director Gordon Haight, looked at the Water Division budget top to bottom. They found efficiencies and other adjustments that will allow us to invest an additional $1.1 million in water infrastructure every year going forward without raising water rates. For the next 8 years, that will mean an additional $8.8 million. And then we did something else the study did not predict. We secured $94.5 million in outside funding for Provo City water infrastructure. Let me say that again. We secured $94.5 million in outside funding for Provo water infrastructure. This has been a recent theme across our departments and divisions. We build partnerships and we secure outside funds to pay for Provo projects. That's been a hallmark of the last several years of Provo governance. There has never been an era like this in Provo's history. The benefits for Provo's residents are astounding. I applaud the creativity of my team that has pulled this plan together. To be clear, if we did no water rate increase for the next 8 years, and if we did not secure another dollar of outside funding, our investment in Provo City water infrastructure during the current 10-year period will be $163 million. So as far as revenue goes, as far as dollars invested in our water infrastructure, Provo is not kicking the can. We are crushing it. And the fact that we've found outside funds to pay for Provo water infrastructure is a positive. Outside funding should always be our first choice. Residents' pockets should always be our last resort. Is that the full story? No. We will need more revenue in the future, and it's good to plan for that. I always encourage my staff to look at least 20 years out. The study anticipates the need for additional funding in coming decades. Ongoing funding is stable. If you're going to have higher expenses in the future, saving up for those today is wise, and residents generally prefer smaller adjustments over abrupt ones. The council, you all have done a lot of good, hard work to move us towards achieving that stable funding, and I appreciate that. The proposal a couple of weeks ago was great, but I ask you to consider a compromise proposal. The council was considering raising an additional 5% of water revenue this year, with the highest group of Provo water users seeing an average increase to their bills of 18%. In the interest of everyone, I'm asking the council to consider the information presented today and consider a new proposal that essentially cuts the increase in half. This proposal will increase our revenue by 2.5% instead of 5%. And the highest user group will see average increases of 9.9% instead of 18.5%. Now, residents, it's important to know that the state has made it clear, including through legislation, that cities need to implement tiered water rates, different rates for different amounts of water, and they have a conservation purpose. The rates are supposed to encourage people to use less water. A key to good city governance is looking at things from all angles. Consider the residents we heard from who told us that it was Provo City that made them put in large amounts of sod and landscaping. And now it is Provo City that would be hiking their rates 18% in one vote. Fairness is a great principle that has many applications. We want to be fair. You want to be fair about who pays for infrastructure based on the science of water demand. But we should also keep an eye on fairness in other ways. We urge moderation in the use of water. Significantly, we urge moderation in the use of water. Let us also use moderation in introducing a new billing approach to our residents. We've had a massive infusion of cash for our water infrastructure. Let us use that to bless our residents by allowing a phase in to the water tiers mandated by the state law. Let's educate our residents on water-saving methods that won't damage the beauty and utility of their lawns. Our sustainability team is exceptional and has put together a pamphlet to help with that. Let's get to work and distribute that information and help our residents adjust. On several occasions, you heard this administration indicate that no rate increases were needed at this moment. I hope this presentation and chart helps to explain that still, we know your passion on this issue and hope that this middle ground solution provides a path forward that you can support. Full details of my proposal and a calculator showing the new proposal and the original one will be provided to you and the public for consideration. We will have those up and going tomorrow morning at provo.gov side by side. The materials will also be emailed to you shortly if you haven't already received them. Thank you again. This has been a hard process, but I believe your efforts and my efforts have been for the benefit of our residents. John Borgert will now present his budget details in his letter.